Question about Luther. Question about Luther's anti-Semitism. Luther's anti-Semitism in his writings, his support of persecutions and expulsion of Jews from Europe is deeply disturbing and perplexing. How would these attitudes and actions of the father of the Reformation be justified?
Well, I'll just take a shot at it briefly. It is a tough issue, but there are a couple of things you have to understand. One, earlier than the later diatribes against the Jews, Luther wrote a significant essay against anti-Semitism, saying that every Gentile has to understand that ultimately salvation is of the Jews, and that our Lord himself was a Jew. And Luther strongly criticized anybody who would hate somebody simply because they were of Jewish ethnicity. Later on, one of the great issues that disturbed him was the exploitation of the people by the major banking houses of Europe that were involved in shameful levels of usury. That is, extortive levels of interest rates. And that particular industry was controlled by basically the Jewish families of Germany. And that was one great point of contention. The other one was contemporary forms of Judaism as a religion were in such opposition to Christianity and to the central affirmation of the identity of Jesus as the Messiah. That provoked Luther's wrath. Luther understood that post-first century Judaism was not an extension of Old Testament Judaism, but a patent rejection of Old Testament Judaism, as we saw the great crisis between Jesus and the Jewish leaders who rejected his messianic office. So that all subsequent forms of Judaism, conservative, Orthodox, Reform, were all, though they differed among themselves, shared that common rejection of Christ as Messiah. And so Luther wasn't hating Jews because they were Jews, but Luther was profoundly opposed to Judaism as a hostile religious faith towards Christianity.
I think there's another issue as well. People bring up that and Edwards and slavery and Calvin and issues that he had, and I think one of the dangers in all of that is that we're assuming that, number one, there are some Christian writers, leaders, historical figures out there that weren't sinners, right? Because whatever Luther wrote, here's a newsflash, what he thought was worse. And I'm not talking about this issue. I just mean in general. He was a sinful man. He said sinful things. He thought sinful things. He did sinful things. But so are you. And it's always ironic to me that people want to dismiss Luther or Calvin or Edwards or whomever because of some issue that they find out about in their lives, but they don't disqualify themselves for things that they think and say and do. And the fact of the matter is, God's never used a sinless man to write things for us. All of them are sinners. So unless you're getting ready to dismiss everything that's ever been written, be real careful about, whether or not somebody who writes things that are true and helpful should be dismissed because there are areas in their life where they were inconsistent and hypocritical, because that's all of us.